The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
Hello and welcome to this brand new edition of Global Lens on News 9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. We have a packed show for you, but let's begin with our big focus, which is, as always, the Israel-Hamas war. Prime Minister Narendra Modi today spoke to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about the Israel-Hamas war. Prime Minister Modi has said he highlighted India's stand in favor of early restoration of peace in Gaza. This is information he shared earlier this evening on the social media platform X, formerly Twitter. Now, amid what is perceived to be a growing rift between the United States and Israel over civilian casualties in Gaza, U.S. Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin discussed with Israeli officials routes towards the future for Gaza after Hamas and the protection of civilians in the Strip. Israel's Defence Minister Yoav Gallant said the military will gradually transition to the next phase of the war and expects displaced Palestinians to return to their homes in northern Gaza before those from the south. Much of the north has been decimated by airstrikes. Austin discussed with his Israeli counterpart how lower intensity combat and ways to reduce harm to officials need to be implemented. But neither Austin nor Gallant gave a timeline for a move to what Austin called more surgical operations. International pressure for a ceasefire has increased on Israel over the nearly 20,000 civilian casualties resulting from a massive bombing campaign and ground war aimed at destroying Hamas, which governs Gaza and fights guerrilla style from a network of urban tunnels. While the White House, or rather the United States, provides Israel with weapons and diplomatic support and has resisted ceasefire calls, it has hardened its stand with Prime Minister Netanyahu's government in the recent past. Last week, U.S. President Joe Biden said Israel was losing international support because of the indiscriminate bombing of Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry has said at least 13 Palestinians have been killed and 75 others wounded in an Israeli strike on the Jabalia refugee camp in the northern Gaza Strip. Israel is yet to respond to these claims. This comes a day after at least 110 people were reported to have been killed at this refugee camp. At 1.4 square kilometers, the Jabalia refugee camp is the largest of 8 camps in Gaza and has been home to some 116,000 registered refugees. On Sunday, Pope Francis accused Israel's military of terrorism tactics after their reported shooting of 2 Palestinian Christian women who had taken refuge in a Gaza church. Israel's military says it is not true that they had shot the women. Meanwhile, the U.S. Defence Secretary also announced a new U.S.-led security operation in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden following attacks by Yemen's Iran-backed Houthis, who say their strikes on commercial ships are in revenge for Israel's war against Hamas. Several countries have agreed to jointly carry out patrols in the southern Red Sea and Gulf of Aden to try and safeguard commercial shipping against attacks by the Houthis. It is not clear yet whether those countries are willing to do what U.S. warships have done in recent days, shoot down Houthi missiles and drones and rush to the aid of commercial ships under attack. Lloyd Austin has said this is an international challenge that demands collective action. Therefore, I'm announcing the establishment of Operation Prosperity Guardian, an important new multinational security initiative. The participating countries are the United States, Bahrain, Britain, Canada, France, Italy, Netherlands, Norway, Seychelles and Spain. The Iran-backed Houthis have waded into the Israel-Hamas conflict by attacking vessels in vital shipping lanes and even firing drones and missiles at Israel more than 1,000 miles from their seat of power in the Yemeni capital of Sana'a. The Houthis have threatened to target all ships heading to Israel regardless of their nationality and warned international shipping companies against dealing with Israeli ports. The UN Security Council is due to vote later today on a new ceasefire motion, and reports say the language has been watered down to a suspension of hostilities from a cessation of hostilities to get US backing. British Foreign Minister David Cameron will call for increased coordination between allies to address the desperate humanitarian situation in Gaza during a visit to Paris and Rome today. Cameron is also expected to reiterate his call for a sustainable ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. On Monday, Hamas released a short video showing 3 elderly Israeli hostages, one of whom can be heard saying they have health issues and are suffering greatly in very harsh conditions. He pleaded for Israel to secure their unconditional release. Israel has denounced it as a criminal terrorist video that shows Hamas's cruelty against very elderly civilians and innocents who need medical care. Late last week, the Israeli forces ended up killing 3 of their own hostages, mistaking them to be Hamas operatives. The killing of the 3 escaping hostages, who, according to an initial inquiry, were waving a white flag, has prompted outrage among some Israelis and an acknowledgement by officials that the soldiers involved did not follow the designated rules of engagement. On Sunday, the Israel Defence Forces said they had uncovered the biggest Hamas tunnel in Gaza, spanning a length of 4 kilometers. The IDF said the tunnel, secured a few weeks ago but revealed to the public only on Sunday, is wide enough to drive a large vehicle through, reaches up to 50 meters underground, and is equipped with electricity, ventilation and communication systems. It does not cross into Israel but ends 400 meters before the now shut Erez crossing on the northern Israeli-Gazan border. Erez was stormed during the 7th October attacks. The tunnel was a part of Hamas's strategic infrastructure and would be destroyed, according to the IDF. In a video shared by them, the Israeli military claimed that the tunnel was created for Hamas troop movements and as a launching point for attacks. In fact, in a statement, the IDF has alleged that the tunnel system was a project of Mohammed Sinwar, the brother of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. The IDF claims to have exposed hundreds of terror tunnel shafts throughout the Gaza Strip and says it is operating to locate and destroy dozens of attack tunnel routes.
We will continue to operate in different levels of intensity according to the situation in the region, and I can tell you that soon we will be able to distinguish between different areas in Gaza. In every area where we achieve our mission, we will be able to transition gradually to the next phase and start working on bringing back local population. That means that it can be achieved maybe sooner in the north rather than in the south. So we are dealing with all the different components, and we will decide in the next future, the early future.
This is Israel's operation, and I'm not here to dictate timelines or terms. Our support to Israel's right to defend itself is ironclad, as you've heard me say a number of times, and that's not going to change. It's critical, as I said earlier, that Hamas not be able to threaten Israel from Gaza or even threaten Gaza anymore. You know, that's an interest that we all share. It's a common interest with all of us. And so today we had great discussions about the status of the campaign, about goals and objectives, and about how to reduce harm to civilians in the battle space.
All right. So what do these developments really mean, and what does the Israeli Defence Minister mean when he says that the next phase of the Hamas war is about to begin? To make sense of it, we are joined by Anat Bernstein-Reich, President of the Israel-Asia Chamber of Commerce, Dr. Harel Jor, Palestinian affairs expert at the Moshe Dayan Center at the Tel Aviv University, and completing the panel is Lev Aaron, Israeli columnist and journalist. A warm welcome to all my guests. Welcome back to Global Lens. Anat Bernstein-Reich, let me begin with you. How do you see this meeting that has taken place between the U.S. Defence Secretary and the Israeli Defence Minister Yoav Gallant, where of course the U.S. has once again emphasized that there is a need for Israel to do more to protect civilian lives, but there is now talk about the war entering the next phase. Yoav Gallant says that a lot of the Palestinians who've been displaced may actually be able to return to their homes in northern Gaza. However, no timeline has been laid down. What we are told, though, is that the US is keen that Israel change its strategy and move towards more precision surgical strikes. What more can you tell us about this? If you could just put this into perspective for our viewers.
First, good evening to you, Nea, and to your audience. The collaboration and the coordination with the U.S. is an ongoing process. It's Austin Lloyd's visit to Israel is just one of the so many, I would say, daily discussions between U.S. and the Israeli government, and of course the IDF, whether it's President Biden or Minister of Defense from U.S. or many other officials from the U.S. government. So U.S. pushing Israel for more surgical, I wouldn't call it pushing, I wouldn't call it asking. They work hand in hand and they make joint decisions. Okay, Israel needs the U.S. support, and the U.S. wants Israel to finish its work with Hamas. We have the same objective. As to the way to do it, that's the question. And I think that when they met yesterday and the day before, they agreed on the way forward. We all agreed that the work is not done. We all agreed that Hamas is still active. Actually, 2 hours back, we had sirens here. I'm in my Tel Aviv office, and Israel was attacked with tens of sirens all over, which means that Hamas still have fuel, still have ammunition, and there is still work to do, because it can't be that midday in the center of Tel Aviv and wherever in Israel, we're still under rocket attack. So Hamas is continuing their mission to destroy Israel even every day. When you're talking about a surgical operation, we all aim not to hurt civilians. From day one, Israel is saying it. We don't want to hurt civilians. We are doing the minimum we can to not to hurt civilians. And of course, this is a mission for the U.S. and to Israel. So nothing is new, I would say. But when Gallant said that they will make an extra effort, I'm sure that he means it. And usually what they say, they also do. And again, it's a close collaboration with the U.S. that continues. Nothing is new here.
Okay, you're saying nothing is new here, but Lev Aaron, we all know that the language being used by U.S. officials in the last few days seems to have changed significantly. The U.S. President, Joe Biden, no less, said Israel was fast losing support because of indiscriminate bombing of Gaza. We know what the United Nations has been saying time and again. Over the weekend, Pope Francis accused Israel's military of terrorism tactics. There is no doubt that there is growing pressure on Israel, particularly from its closest ally, the United States. What do you make of Lloyd Austin's visit to Israel, the talks that he's had with Israeli officials, and the fact that after repeatedly stating that Israel must move to surgical operations, the US seems to be, in a sense, pushing the Israeli government in that direction, with Yoav Gallant now talking about the next phase of the war. What more do we know about this next phase of the war? No timeline has been given. There is talk about how displaced Palestinians will be able to return home. But realistically, how soon can we really see that happening?
Good evening. I'm very happy to be here. Last time that I was hosted here, you asked me and I told you that I don't think that the Americans will impose a ceasefire on Israel because Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, the Houthis, and Putin are all in the same camp. So on one hand, I don't think that they will impose a ceasefire. They will also not impose the tactics of Israel in Gaza. I think also inside Israel, we hear a lot of voices that maybe we should change our tactics in Gaza because of the death toll, because 3 hostages were killed by our own soldiers. We have our own domestic internal reasons for changing the way that we are fighting in Gaza. I don't think it will be by a way that Americans are dictating Israel. I think that on the humanitarian front, we are in an opposite situation. I think on the humanitarian front, Americans will tell us that some things that we are doing, they cannot digest in the international arena. Thank you.
Okay. Interesting. Dr. Harel Jor, come in here. Lev Aaron seems to think it's not so much pressure from the United States that's prompting the Israeli government to perhaps change its war strategy in Gaza. There is also domestic pressure from within. We know there's been a lot of outrage in Israel following the killing of 3 Israeli hostages. Despite the fact that they'd waved a red flag, and there is now the speculation about whether the soldiers in question had failed to follow the designated rules of fighting. You know, at the same time, Hamas has released a new video showing 3 very elderly hostages, one of whom says, "We are suffering in very harsh conditions. We have serious health problems." They are pleading with the Israeli government to secure their unconditional release. Given all the pressure that has been building up both globally and domestically, do you believe that the Israeli government is now ready to change its tactics? And if the answer is yes, what kind of a change do you really foresee? There is all this talk about precision strikes, surgical operations. What does that really mean? And can we really expect that to maybe minimize the civilian casualties, which, by the way, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, has already almost touched 20,000, the figure I mean?
Well, good evening, Nia. You've asked many questions, so if I forget anything, please feel free to ask me again. First of all, I wouldn't frame, and I think my 2 friends here said basically the same thing. I wouldn't frame the whole meeting of Secretary Lloyd with Gallant around that issue of precision and reducing the civilian casualties. I don't think that was the main issue there. And I, of course, bear in mind what President Biden said almost a week ago, which I think was too hasty, if you'll ask me. I think it had nothing to do with the way Israel worked these days. This is not the Second World War, indiscriminate bombing. You know, from so many perspectives, it's just ineffective on Israel's behalf, and I don't think this is the way Israel is working. Anyway, I think also, and I had the opportunity to mention it in the American media several times, there is a strong contradiction, Nia, between asking Israel to wrap it up or to move to the next phase, and at the same time to ask us to work cautiously. These are conflicting goals. You cannot work fast and at the same time cautiously. It just doesn't work together. And the way I see it, particularly because of Secretary Lloyd's statement yesterday that he didn't come to set any deadline for Israel. And by the way, you can strengthen this conclusion by Sullivan's statement as well. You can see that America, as for the moment, is not setting any deadline. But I heard from on Israel's behalf when Lloyd asked about it. Israel said something between mid-January to end of January to move to the next phase. The next phase basically is to move to a more surgical operations after Israel has captured the whole terrain above, namely to start deal systematically with the tunnels, but only after the terrain above the tunnels was captured, and then you can, of course, afford the more surgical sort of fighting. You don't need to bomb houses and with terrorists inside, because it's really changed. The whole mission is changing. This is, by the way, something that we already see to a large extent in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, where they are already working, at least in, I think, 90% of the Gaza Strip, they are already working to discover tunnels, to destroy them, such as this tunnel that you showed us before, which is really striking. And as for the pressure within Israel, I don't think it's a monolithic kind of pressure. It's not that people are saying enough with this war or enough with the killing of civilians. It's basically people are asking them questions, and you get different replies. You get a reply that we should use more force in order to defend our soldiers on the one hand, particularly after several disasters that we had last week with 10 soldiers and high-rank officer who died in one incident. And on the other hand, an incident like our 3 kidnaps that unfortunately were killed by our own people, and I know it's inquired. And so you get different kinds of thoughts, but nothing really is in terms of pressure or I would say single-minded understanding or a consensus on how we should continue. At the moment, I think that if there is a consensus, is that we need to continue and destroy Hamas. I don't think there's anything that can even challenge this thought at the moment.
Okay, you say that there is a consensus. However, some might question that. We are in fact expecting the United Nations Security Council to once again vote on a ceasefire motion, and reports suggest that the language has been watered down to get US backing. US was not willing to support this motion because it talked about cessation of hostilities. Now this may be changed to suspension of hostilities, and we'll see what happens finally to this motion. At the same time, British Foreign Minister David Cameron, let me mention this for the benefit of our viewers, is going to be in Paris and Rome today, where not only is he going to talk about the desperately needed humanitarian aid in Gaza, but also he's expected to reiterate his demand for, or his call for, a sustainable ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. So let me go back to Anat Bernstein-Reich. Anat, we've talked about the things that President Biden has said in the very recent past, the fact that almost every US official who's visited Israel in recent days, from Antony Blinken to Jake Sullivan to Lloyd Austin, while extending support to Israel on the one hand, on the other has also repeatedly pointed out that Israel needs to do more to minimize casualties. What do you make of the growing international chorus for a ceasefire? Of course, it doesn't look like Israel is moved very significantly by that. And also tell us a little bit about the mood at home. Would it be correct to say that there is a lot of anger, not only because of the killing of the 3 Israeli hostages by the Israeli forces late last week, but also because of the new videos that are coming out showing the hostages in really bad conditions, and the fact that you still have a lot of people there who are still trapped in Gaza, waiting desperately to return home and to be reunited with their loved ones, which also complicates this military campaign for Israel in many ways.
So let me first reply to you about, you were asking whether there is anger. So I wouldn't say that there is anger. There is big sorrow for the incident. Those incidents happen. I mean, one unit shoots other unit. This is part of a war. And unfortunately, it happens, and this misfortunate event with the 3 hostages was a big shock to all of us. What it created, it's not anger. It's a big cry to the government to work on a new arrangements with Hamas to release the balance hostages. We have 129 hostages still kept with Hamas, including the 2 redhead babies and 10 women, which we are suspecting that they are treated the way Hamas is treating women, young women. So there is a big pressure on the government to talk to their allies, let it be Qatar, Egypt, and U.S., to come up with a new pact with or trust with Hamas, which will include, of course, a ceasefire, because that's how it works. But in the streets in Israel, we are very clear of the way forward. I mean, we had such a big shock in October 7th that we understand that there is no other solution. Hamas doesn't want to stop the war because they're winning. It's because they're losing, so they're crying for a ceasefire. So if you'll ask everyone here, or let's say not everyone, but most of the people are in favor of this war, in favor of eliminating Hamas. But on the other end, we say, okay, we can eliminate Hamas in a month's time. Let's now focus on the hostage. Let's focus on the people. And those 3 old men, they are over 70 and one even over 80. The Red Cross, which I over and over mentioned, that they don't do their job. They're not providing anything to the hostage. They didn't even go to see them. They went to see the Palestinian hospitals, but they didn't push enough the Hamas to really meet the hostages. So this is the problem. And the hostages that came back, and several came back in very bad condition, make us push the government, pressure the government to come to some understanding. So this is the mood in Israel. We are very resilient. I mean, now I invite you to come to Israel to meet the people here. People are serving in the army now almost more than 70 days,
yes.
And they want to continue. The spirit is there. We understand that this is a survival mode, and we have no other choice but to finish Hamas and try to bring peace to this region.
All right. Trying to finish Hamas and to bring peace to the region. Of course, the safety and welfare of the hostages continues to be a big concern for Israel. I need to take a quick break here on the show, but don't go anywhere. On the other side, we will continue this discussion with our guests from Israel.
हमारी नारी शक्ति को सशक्त करने से ही देश सशक्त होने वाला है।
हर महीने महिलाओं को 1500 रुपए प्रति माह दिलवाया जाएगा।
What Nitish Kumar did to provide cycle to girls, so they could safely, quickly move out of the house, go to school, and quickly come back. Tring, 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 tring.
माँ अन्नपूर्णा तू ही, माँ अन्नपूर्णा है तू ही वीणा वादनी, हे शक्ति स्वरूपा जगदम्बा, हे नारी तू नारायणी।
News is now content. Just stream it. Download the world's first news OTT, News9 Plus, ahead of the curve.
China won't let us rest easy on our borders, but they will keep flooding our markets. What does Xi Jinping really want?
I think he wants the Indian market, no doubt about it. It's really a matter of showing their dominance.
India's great Chinese conundrum.
Nobody can contain it. Not the United States, not China, not anybody else.
Frenemies. This and more, streaming on the world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
Jyotiraditya Scindia is also facing a litmus test.
There have been corruption charges against all the chief ministers or towering leaders who were rich, but this is not the case with Scindia. So the point is that in modern times, when the society is looking up to good leaders, so Jyotiraditya Scindia could be one of them.
As far as Jyotiraditya Scindia is concerned, even if the BJP loses, Jyotiraditya Scindia will be around for at least another 2 decades. He is young and he has the ability to come back.
This and more, streaming now on the world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
Hello everyone, Namaskar. I'm music composer Ricky Cage. 3-time Grammy Award winner and a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador. And you're watching me on First Person on News9 Plus.
This and more, streaming now on the world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
Currently, the industry is facing a lot of challenges as far as demand is concerned. Basically, the U.S. markets has slowed down because of high inflation.
So obviously, diamonds being a dream product, something which doesn't have a utility value or is seen as a luxury. So that obviously goes off your shopping list. That's the first item that will go off your shopping list, especially in recessionary trends.
That lab-grown diamonds are not mined, and they do away with the entire mining. So they save up on all the environmental damage that is associated with mining, and of course, the mining cost, which is why they're even more affordable.
People that is impacted by all these recessions are the artisans, are the people who work in this industry, right? But I think lab-grown diamond has allowed them to actually use their skills in the same product.
This and more, streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
Welcome back. We're talking about the Israel-Hamas war, which Israel says is poised to enter the next phase. All right, my next question is for both Dr. Harel Jor and Lev Aaron. Starting with Lev Aaron. Lev, Reuters, the news agency, has just put out a story saying Israeli President Isaac Herzog has indicated readiness on part of the country to enter another foreign-mediated Gaza truce in order to recover hostages held by Hamas. President Isaac Herzog told a gathering of ambassadors, as per Reuters, and I'm quoting him here, Israel is ready for another humanitarian pause and additional humanitarian aid in order to enable the release of hostages. What should we make of the Israeli president's statement? Is he speaking for the Israeli government?
I'm sure that our president could not say anything without the consent of the cabinet ministers, including Netanyahu, the prime minister. So I'm sure that everything that Herzog is saying, he's just, he knows what he's saying, and he's saying it in a way in the name of all of us. If there is one impact of the terrible incident in which 3 of our soldiers were killed by 3 of our hostages were killed by our own soldiers, is that we had the concept that the way that we are fighting Hamas is also the way to release the hostages. I think at least in this question, more Israelis have questions if the 2 of them are really going well together. So in a way, On one hand, I think that Hamas is losing the war, so maybe Hamas is ready to give us things that maybe a fortnight ago Hamas was not ready to give. And on the other hand, also our government, they can hear the voices in Israel that tells them, look, via a military operation, we are not sure that we can bring all the hostages back home.
Okay, so let me put this question to Dr. Chore. Dr. Chore, what should be made of what your president is saying? This is a significant statement. It's not come from the Prime Minister. It's not come from the Defence Minister. It's come from the Israeli president. What do you make of it?
Well, I think it actually embodies both things. I mean, the president is fully aware of the fact that everybody are determined to eradicate Hamas and at the same time to take care of our hostages. We need to understand, you've mentioned the horrific video from yesterday where we saw those elderly hostages, you know, people at the age of 85, didn't take a shower for 2 months. It's quite clearly from what we see there, sick, and you know what, even bearded in a way that is, anyone who is specialist on the Middle East will tell you immediately, these beards are not there just because they didn't shave. These beards are typical Islamic Salafia kind of beard, namely without the mustache. Namely, they were put as if they were Muslims by another message of control of Hamas, and they looked really, really poor. And I don't think there is a single Israeli who is not really terrified about their fate. So I think anything that can be achieved within this void between a ceasefire, a reasonable ceasefire, and a limited one, which is very important, not a sustainable one. A sustainable only after Hamas will be destroyed. But anything that comes between a reasonable ceasefire, including humanitarian aid, which you, by the way, mentioned before, we need to understand the problem with the humanitarian aid, it's the supply. They're getting hundreds of trucks probably every day. The thing is that Hamas robbed them on a daily basis, robbed it for its own people. You can see the footage, and the poor population was left behind. And this is why you see so many frustration by the population against Hamas, something that you wouldn't see, Nia, before October 7th. And so I think the president is trying to reflect this understanding in Israel that we are willing to pay the price of a limited ceasefire, including other things, including a painful release of prisoners, of Palestinian terrorists, with blood on their hands, by the way, at this stage, and in order to get our people back, because it's really unbearable. What they're doing to those hostages is beyond any imagination. How someone can treat a human being in the way they're treated. Levin, and not mentioned those two redhead babies that are still in captive. How can you hold an 11-year-old baby and to use it as a card within your play with Israel? It's just unbearable. So I think we're working within this void. I don't see it clearly. I don't see it ending with a result that would be a sustainable ceasefire. Because a sustainable ceasefire, as I already told you a few weeks ago, is a victory for Hamas. This is exactly the achievement they're trying to reach at this moment. They want to stop the war in order to establish their achievement from October 7th.
Okay, so you don't see a sustainable ceasefire taking place, but there may well be another temporary truce. Anat, this is very, very significant. First, 3 Israeli hostages are killed mistakenly by the Israel Defence Forces. Next, you have a video of 3 elderly hostages being released by Hamas. You can see those gentlemen in a very pitiable condition. They're pleading with the Israelis to have them released. And now the Israeli president issues this statement saying Israel is ready for another humanitarian pause and additional humanitarian aid in order to enable the release of hostages. And the responsibility, he says, lies fully with Yahya Sinwar and the other Hamas leadership. However, let me tell you what Hamas has said. Hamas has already said, we affirm our position of categorically rejecting to hold any form of negotiations over prisoners exchange under the continuing Israeli genocidal war. So Hamas seems to be saying, you want your hostages back, you want to negotiate with us, stop the bombing first. Your thoughts, do you see this temporary truce taking place at all?
Yes, yes. So Hamas said it. So what? They said so many things. I mean, they are murderers, they are liars. They know how to negotiate, and that's them. But they will need the ceasefire. They need the support of Qatar and Egypt. They are not in void totally. Okay, let's remember that Hamas leaders, many of them, are in Qatar at the moment. They are hosted by Qatar. Qatar has means to influence Hamas, and they will do it, and they have interest to do it as well. So Hamas said that they will not. I believe that they really need this ceasefire. They want to release the Hamas terrorists that are kept in Israel. So eventually it will happen. As to the video that we saw of those three elderly, this is not the first time, okay? I'll remind you that we had Maya Shem was released a video when she was captive, and then Yarden Bibas, the father of the two redheads, released a video. It's not him. The Hamas released his video crying for help, and another three ladies. So this is systematic work of Hamas to release video, to create pressure. It's psychological terror, as we call it. It's not new. And our heart, of course, goes to those elderly, which they need their medicine, and they are in bad shape. And 85 years lady that was released from captivity was rushed to the hospital in a very severe condition because she didn't get her medicine. So we understand it, but again, this is Hamas tactic to put pressure. There is pressure on the government, and I hope that this truce will come up soon, as President Herzog said a while back.
Okay, Lev, I'll give you the last word. As Anat says, of course, there is psychological terror or warfare at play here. But if this second temporary truce were to in fact materialize, what conditions do you think Israel is likely to lay down before Hamas? And what do you think Hamas's demand would be before they agree to a second truce?
Okay, Hamas wants the war to stop, at least for like few days, to regroup, to understand their situation. Israel wants mainly the elderly, the babies, the women. So I think that if Israel gets, let's say, the weakened part, the weakened link of the hostages among Hamas, Israel will be more generous to Hamas. And on the other hand, when Hamas is trying this, let's say, this terror against us via these videos, it is also glues some kind of consensus among Israelis that Hamas has to be defeated. So in a way, it is also an own goal. It is not only a success for Hamas to show three elderly people in such a condition.
All right. Certainly psychological warfare at play. Well, I think it will be a big relief for everyone, frankly, if this second truce does materialize. After all, the stakes are very high for Israel as well, given that almost 130 hostages are still in Hamas captivity. All right, on that note, Anat Bernstein-Reich, Dr. Harel Jor and Lev Aaron, thank you very much for joining me on Global Lens and sharing your time and perspective with us.
Thank you, Nia.
Well, let's now shift our focus from the Israel-Hamas war to the elections in Egypt. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has won a third 6-year term with almost 90% of the vote. The former army chief beat 3 low-profile candidates, with the runner-up securing just about 4.5% of the vote. Leading opposition candidate Ahmed Tantawi had pulled out months before last week's poll, claiming intimidation and violence against his campaign. Egypt's faltering economy and the war in Gaza were key electoral issues. The victory in the latest election means al-Sisi will be in power until 2030.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has won a third term in an election where he faced no serious challenges and garnered nearly 90% of votes. According to election authorities on Monday, Sisi called the result a rejection of the inhumane war in neighbouring Gaza. Some voters said the eruption of conflict in Gaza had encouraged them to vote for Sisi, who presents himself as a bulwark of stability in a volatile region. That argument has also proved persuasive to Gulf and Western allies, who provide financial support to his government. Egyptians voted on December 10th to 12th. The state and tightly controlled domestic media pushed hard to boost turnout in the poll, which the election authority said had reached 66.8%, above the 41% recorded at the last presidential election in 2018. The election featured 3 other candidates, none of them high profile. The most prominent potential challenger halted his run in October, saying officials and thugs had targeted his supporters, accusations dismissed by the election authority. Many people in the Arab world's most populous country expressed indifference about the election, saying the result was a foregone conclusion. Reuters reporters witnessed voters being bussed into some polling stations and bags of food being handed out, while some voters said they were offered financial incentives. The state media body said any provision of money or goods in return for votes was a criminal offence. Sisi, a former general, has overseen a sweeping crackdown on dissent across the political spectrum since he led the overthrow of Egypt's first democratically elected leader, Mohamed Morsi of the Egyptian Brotherhood, in 2013.
Well, here on Global Lens, we're keeping a close eye on all the big elections around the globe. From the Israeli elections, let's now shift our focus to next year's U.S. presidential elections, and the contest is already heating up. Republican frontrunner Donald Trump has declared plans for the largest deportation in American history if he is re-elected in 2024. During a rally in Reno, Trump labelled President Biden a low IQ individual and the worst, most incompetent and most corrupt president in U.S. history. A day earlier, Trump in New Hampshire had accused undocumented immigrants of poisoning the blood of our country, as he put it, using language criticized as xenophobic and echoing Nazi rhetoric. He emphasized the stance amid concerns about the record number of migrants attempting illegal U.S. border crossings. Meanwhile, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has signed SB 4, a new law allowing state law enforcement to arrest individuals suspected of illegally crossing the U.S.-Mexico border, a power traditionally held by federal agencies. The law, effective in March, establishes a new state crime for illegal entry into Texas, with penalties ranging from 180 days to 20 years in prison. Judges will mandate migrants to return to Mexico with potential 20-year sentences for non-compliance. Abbott has also approved a $1.5 billion bill for border wall construction, in addition to the existing $5 billion in state funds allocated for border enforcement. Abbott has criticized President Biden for perceived tax enforcement of lax enforcement, of federal laws on illegal entry. Abbott said, and I quote, Biden's deliberate inaction has left Texas to fend for itself. A record number of migrants have been caught crossing the U.S.-Mexico border since Biden, a Democrat, took office in 2021. Abbott and other Republicans blame Biden, who is seeking re-election in 2024, for rolling back restrictive policies of former President Donald Trump. More than half of the 5.8 million migrant arrests under Biden took place in Texas and neighboring New Mexico, at times straining the resources of border cities.
Given the unprecedented millions of Biden illegal aliens who are invading our country, it is only common sense that when I'm re-elected, we will begin, and we have no choice, the largest deportation operation in American history. We have no. On my first day back in the White House, I will terminate every open borders policy of the Biden administration. And I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act to remove all known or suspected gang members, drug dealers, or cartel members from the United States, ending the scourge of illegal alien gang violence once and for all. Joe Biden and the Democrat Party are incapable of solving any problem. There's not a problem they've been able to solve. Crooked Joe is a you know this. Did you ever hear this? Crooked Joe is a low IQ individual. And he is truly the worst, most incompetent, and most corrupt president in the history of our country. In fact, Jimmy Carter is very happy because he looks like that was a brilliant administration by comparison to what you have right now.
Biden's deliberate inaction has left Texas to fend for itself. The authors of the United States Constitution foresaw a situation when the federal government would be inattentive to states that faced challenges at their borders. I will sign 3 laws today to better protect Texas and America from Biden's border neglect. The first is Senate Bill 4 from the 4th special session. The goal of Senate Bill 4 is to stop the tidal wave of illegal entry into Texas. It creates a criminal offense for illegal entry into Texas from a foreign nation.
And finally, some good news for the LGBTQ community, and this comes from the Vatican. In a landmark ruling approved by Pope Francis, the Vatican has announced the Roman Catholic priests can now administer blessings to same-sex couples as long as they are not part of regular church rituals or liturgies. A document from the Vatican's doctrinal office, which effectively reversed a declaration the same body had issued in 2021, said such blessings would not legitimize irregular situations but be a sign that God welcomes all. But it should in no way be confused with the sacrament of heterosexual marriage. That's what the document says.
In a landmark ruling announced by the Vatican on Monday, Pope Francis formally authorized Catholic priests to bless same-sex couples. The radical shift was described as a major step forward by Father James Martin, a Jesuit priest who ministers to the LGBT community.
It's really the first time that there's been any sort of opening to blessing same-sex couples, so it's a big deal.
Monday's announcement marked another significant change made by the Pope in his effort to make the Roman Catholic Church more welcoming. But the new rule made clear that such blessings can only be administered on a case-by-case basis and only as long as they are not part of regular church rituals or liturgies. It also said that it should in no way be confused with the sacrament of heterosexual marriage. Outside St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, Martin Hardwick and his partner Andrew Gibb welcomed the news.
You know, if Jesus said love was love, then love is love, isn't it? We've been together 41 years. So, and we're married.
So it's about time, yeah. Long overdue.
Yeah.
In Pope Francis's hometown of Buenos Aires, some residents saw the ruling as a measure to fight discrimination.
It is a paradigm shift for the church, and the inclusion of same-sex couples is a change for the church. As Argentinians, we feel proud that the Pope has taken this initiative, because in our country, there are laws that have been accompanying this process of transformation for several years.
Monday's ruling is bound to be opposed by conservatives, who already criticized the Pope when he hinted that an official change was in the works in October, in response to questions put forward by 5 conservative cardinals.
Well, that's all the time we have on this edition of Global Lens. Thanks so much for watching. Do join us again at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.
Hello everyone, Namaskar. I'm music composer Ricky Cage. 3-time Grammy Award winner and a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador. And you're